Talking about UFOs might feel like old news to some, but what about stories from those who have been up there, closer to the stars than we can imagine, like astronauts and pilots? We're going to take a look at the 15 most eye-opening UFO sightings these space travelers have reported. Get ready, because this is a trip that goes beyond the clouds. 15. Gordon Cooper, sighting UFO. Gordon Cooper was an American astronaut, famous for being the last person to fly solo into space. His story adds a fascinating twist to the usual stories we hear about unidentified flying objects or UFOs. On his last trip around Earth alone in a space vehicle called Mercury, Cooper saw something amazing, a glowing green thing moving super fast toward him. But what makes his experience stand out? Cooper didn't just catch a quick glimpse of this. He saw it on his space vehicle's scanner and told the space station on Earth right away. Interestingly, reporters were told they couldn't ask Gordon about this strange sighting. This secrecy makes his story seem even more believable. Cooper was always open to the idea of life from other planets. He even said he saw flying saucers that moved in ways he couldn't explain when he was flying planes in Germany, long before his space trip. Cooper didn't just believe in aliens quietly. He was one of the few space explorers who openly talked about what he saw in the sky. In an interview that revealed a lot, he mentioned being told to keep quiet about these sightings, hinting at a big secret about UFOs. His stories go beyond what he saw himself. He claimed that American systems that track objects in the sky spot UFOs nearly every day, but this information is kept from the public to avoid causing panic. Gordon Cooper's stories aren't just about one incident. They give us a peek into a world full of secrets, cover-ups, and maybe a reality filled with life from other planets that are just waiting to be recognized. 14. White and McDivots encounter with UFOs. In June 1965, something pretty wild happened during the Gemini 1V space mission. Major James McDivot was up there, orbiting Earth near Hawaii, when he saw something that looked totally out of place. Imagine being way up above the planet, everything silent around you, and then you see a white tube-shaped object with a bit poking out. This wasn't just some random piece of space junk. It had a specific shape, and McDivots tried to take pictures of it while his fellow astronaut, Ed White, was catching some Z's. This left McDivots alone with his encounter, with no one else to back up what he saw. What McDivots caught on camera wasn't your everyday space find. He even had to steer the spacecraft a bit to avoid what he thought might end up being a too-close encounter. It shows how seriously he took what he saw. But then, as if it came from nowhere, the object just disappeared, making everyone wonder even more about it. Then there's the Condon Report, a big study trying to get to the bottom of UFO stories. Even this report had to admit something was head-scratching about McDivots' sighting. It highlighted how McDivots saw something that didn't match up with any known man-made object out there based on what NORAD, the space tracking folks, had on record. Years down the line, McDivots looked back at what happened with a pretty level head. He said even though he couldn't figure out what the object was, he didn't rush to call it a UFO report or make a big deal out of it. This calm approach is a bit of a contrast to all the buzz and wild guesses it sparked among people fascinated by UFOs and those who are more skeptical. What's clear is that McDivots' encounter remains a standout tale among astronauts' stories about unexplained things they've come across. 13. Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin landing on the moon. In July 1969, a big event in space history happened when Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins went on the first trip to the moon. Riding in their spaceship Columbia, they were aiming for the moon, but also making a big mark in history. Yet, during this amazing space journey, a short talk with the team back on Earth in Houston, Texas, sparked a bunch of stories about UFOs and conspiracy theories that people are still talking about. On the third day of their mission, there was this moment when the Apollo crew checked in with Houston about the location of a part of their rocket, the SIVB stage, which they had let go of earlier. Armstrong asked, "Do you have any idea where the SIVB is with respect to us?" And the folks back in Houston replied, giving them the distance. This might seem like just regular space mission stuff, but it ended up making a lot of people wonder and guess about what else might have been out there with them.
I have no doubt that extraterrestrials could very well have populated or made structures on the far side of the moon.
The recording of this chat and the words exchanged turned into a gold mine for those who love digging into space stories and the idea of other life out there. A simple question about the rocket part turned into something much bigger in people's minds, making them think it might have been about a UFO encounter. 12. Over Montgomery. Story time from the UFO files that has had experts and fans talking for ages. This one is special because it happened before the whole fascination with UFOs started. It all started in the early morning of July 24, 1948, and this event would lay the groundwork for many more stories like it. So, there you are, flying in an Eastern Airlines plane over Montgomery, Alabama, and you're up at about 5,000 feet. The lead pilot, Clarence Childs, notices a dull red light ahead and above them. He nudges his co-pilot, John Whitted, and jokes about it being a new type of military jet. But what came at them next was not any jet they knew. In just moments, this thing that wasn't like any aircraft they'd seen before zoomed past their plane, going so fast it left them in awe. It then shot up into the sky, leaving a trail of flames before it disappeared into the clouds. They said it looked like a long cigar, with windows and 2 levels, which doesn't sound like any plane or natural object, like a meteor. Not only did the 2 pilots see this, but a passenger, C.L. McKelvey, also caught a glimpse of this strange light zooming by his window. Even though it happened quickly, the pilots were sure they watched it for 10 to 15 seconds, making their story even more believable. Some people have tried to say what they saw was just a meteor. But that doesn't hold up when you think about the details the pilots gave, like how it seemed to have a structure and moved in ways a shooting star just doesn't. 11. The Gemini and Apollo missions. Taking a stroll through some of the most jaw-dropping episodes in space history, let's zero in on the Gemini and Apollo missions.
And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light.
Back in December 1965, during a 14-day trip on Gemini 7, astronauts James Lovell and Frank Borman stumbled upon something that wasn't supposed to be there. Borman called in an unidentified object floating in space, clearly not just another piece of space junk, and not their own Titan booster rocket, as confirmed by the team back at Cape Kennedy. The story gets even more interesting when, on December 4th, 1965, Lovell managed to snap pictures of 2 objects shaped a bit like mushrooms. These photos, taken from a distance, seemed to show some glow from underneath, like from a propulsion system. This sparked a big debate. Some were sure these were signs of extraterrestrial tech, while others thought it might just be light bouncing off something, or even doubted the photos were real. Jump to November 1966, during the Gemini 13 mission with Lovell and Edwin Aldrin, and the mystery deepens. They reported seeing 2 UFOs just a half-mile away from their spacecraft, observing and taking photos meticulously, adding more to the ongoing puzzle of what's really out there. Then there's a lighter moment during the Apollo 8 mission in December 1968 with Borman, Lovell, and William A. Anders. As they came around from the dark side of the moon, Lovell's message broadcasted to everyone on Christmas Day saying, "Please be informed there is a Santa Claus," offered a mix of humor and mystery. While it seemed like a fun comment for the kids watching, some wondered if it was a secret message, hinting at something more. On that same mission, Gorman and Lovell reported another sighting, and there were even talks about hearing an unidentified language over NASA's radio frequencies. 10. Andrew Danziger sights UFO. Aviation enthusiasts still get excited over this story. On a clear night, April 10, 1989, under a bright full moon, pilot Andrew Danziger had just left Kansas City International Airport when something amazing happened. Out of nowhere, a strange white circle appeared in the sky, looking almost like a second moon. It seemed to follow the plane, moving through the clouds as if it was dancing with them. The story gets even more curious when the captain mentions he had been watching this mysterious light since they reached high up in the sky. Despite being experienced pilots, used to spotting other planes, balloons, satellites, and birds, they couldn't figure out what this was. The real moon was shining on the other side of their plane, making the whole scene even more baffling. Then, in a surprising turn, the white light suddenly changed to red, took over the sky, and then just melted away into the clouds as they were coming into land. This unexpected change left a deep impression on Danziger. Danziger's story is part of a larger conversation among pilots. They spend countless hours flying and sometimes see things that don't have an easy explanation. 9. Shag Harbor's UFO incident. Canada has its share of big mysteries, and one of the most talked about happened in Shag Harbor, Nova Scotia. People often refer to it as Canada's own Roswell incident. So, on a cool night, October 4th, 1967, this peaceful fishing spot turned into the center of a huge puzzle. Over 10 people saw something strange in the sky. It zoomed across, making a whistling noise, and then it crashed into the ocean with a big boom. Right after seeing this odd thing floating not too far from the shore, Laurie Wickens and his 4 buddies didn't waste a minute. They rushed to tell the Royal Canadian Mounted Police about it. What happened next was a big search with the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Navy, and the Royal Canadian Air Force all trying to find out what it was. But even with all that effort, they didn't find anything they could show for it. They checked out every possible aircraft, whether it was for flying people around, for private use, or the military, all along the coast. But they ended up scratching their heads because this mysterious thing didn't fit into any of those boxes. Even though the Navy tried, searching the bottom of the Gulf of Maine, whatever had made a splash in Shag Harbor didn't leave a single clue behind. Just a bunch of questions and guesses that people are still talking about. It's one of those stories that just sticks around, making you wonder what happened. 8. On a special flight. History has its share of jaw-dropping moments, and there's one from aerospace history that's particularly standout. It happened on April 30th, 1962, involving the X-15, which was a super-fast aircraft. It could fly at a speed of 3,400 miles per hour above the Nevada desert near a place called Mud Lake. The pilot was Joseph A. Walker, a very experienced guy working for NASA. He was on a special flight that day aiming to go super high, and something unexpected happened. While Walker was flying the X-15 and reaching up to about 200,000 feet, he saw something unbelievable. He noticed 2 objects that looked like discs zooming by his aircraft. This was no small thing. He was so struck by it that he immediately told the control room back at Edwards. And just like that, the people listening, including the person writing this and about 20 others, found themselves hearing about this surprising event as it happened. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The X-15 had cameras on it that were always recording. These cameras caught this unusual moment on tape. They showed 2 white or silver disc-like objects flying in formation, passing by the X-15 like it was standing still, and then vanishing into the distance. After the flight, the team and the people who were part of the X-15 program got together for a briefing where they saw this footage. Even though they saw what happened, everyone kept pretty quiet about it. What those objects were, where they came from, or where they went remains a mystery. 7. Lieutenant Gorman engaged in a fight with a UFO. Fargo's night sky held a secret in 1948 that people still talk about. George F. Gorman, a lieutenant with the North Dakota Air National Guard, found himself in an unbelievable situation. It was October 1st, 1948, and he was flying his P-51 Mustang, about to land, when a strange light, not attached to any known aircraft, grabbed his attention from about 500 feet below. Reaching out to the control tower, Gorman learned something even more puzzling. There were no other planes reported in that area. Driven by a mix of curiosity and maybe a bit of the daring spirit pilots have, he went closer to get a better look. What he encountered was a white light, pulsing then steady, as if it knew he was coming closer. Things kicked up a notch quickly. The light zipped around with incredible speed, making moves that didn't seem possible, even coming right at Gorman and then shooting up into the night, disappearing at around 14,000 feet. By 9:27 p.m., whatever Gorman had seen was gone, leaving a trail of unanswered questions. From the ground, two guys in the airport's control tower, Lloyd D. Jensen and Shee Johnson, also saw this strange light, making Gorman's story even more solid. Gorman was left with the impression that whatever he saw out there wasn't just moving randomly. It seemed like there was some intelligence behind it. 6. Turkish Pilots. A flight left the beautiful spot of Bodrum, making its way to the bustling city of Istanbul, when something straight out of a mystery happened. The Turkish Airlines pilots were cruising along when they spotted a mysterious green light that seemed to wrap around the sky above their plane. The pilot, who's seen a lot in his flying days, reported seeing an object glowing with green lights zoom past them. It was flying higher, about 2,000 to 3,000 feet up, and then it just disappeared as quickly as it showed up. They thought it might be a UFO.
Tower, this is Dave.
Hey, Dave, it's Sid from United Tower.
Hey, Sid.
Hey, did you see a flying disc out by C-17?
Don't even start, Sue.
No,
You're seeing flying discs.
well, that's what the pilot and the ramp guys are telling us. The C-17, they saw some flying disc.
But the story gets even thicker. People started saying they saw this same green light over the Silivri district in Istanbul, making everyone wonder what was going on. Despite all the buzz, the folks who managed the airspace said they couldn't find any proof of something unusual up there that matched what the pilot said. Some people tried to explain it away with a simple idea, a green laser pointer shining up at the clouds. But let's be real, pilots know their stuff. They can tell the difference between some laser pointer show and something out of the ordinary. The idea that a little laser could create such a huge, mysterious light show seems a bit too much. 5. Mysterious event at Chicago O'Hare Airport. O'Hare International Airport had a day that turned heads on November 7, 2006. This wasn't just another busy day. It became the center of a story that folks still bring up. Witnesses, including almost a dozen United Airlines employees ranging from pilots to ground staff, reported seeing a metallic, saucer-shaped object. This thing wasn't making any noise as it hovered in the sky, and then it shot up so fast it cut through the clouds, leaving behind a perfect circle in the sky. A reporter named John Hilkovich from the Chicago Tribune brought this story to everyone's attention, mentioning that the object hung around for about 2 minutes. At first, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, didn't want to talk about it, saying they didn't have any info on the sighting. But after some digging through a Freedom of Information Act request, bits and pieces of conversations about the UFO started to surface, suggesting there might be more to the story. The FAA tried to explain it away at first by saying it was a weather thing called a hole punch cloud. But the weather that day didn't support that theory. Then, they tried to say it was because of the airport lights, But those lights weren't even on when the sighting happened. Even with so many people seeing the same thing, there was never an official investigation into what happened that day. 4. 1986 UFO sighting by Japanese pilots. Back in November 1986, something happened that left people scratching their heads, involving a Japanese Airlines cargo flight over the cold skies of Alaska. The captain, Kenju Terauchi, and his crew were just flying along, carrying French wine, thinking it was going to be a routine flight. But then, something unexpected turned their journey into a major talking point among UFO stories. At first, Captain Terauchi thought they might have run into US fighter jets, maybe on a patrol because it was the Cold War era and they were near the Soviet border. But then, these objects did something that made him realize they weren't any normal jets. He described how two spacecraft suddenly appeared right in front of their plane, shining so bright that the cockpit lit up and he could feel the warmth on his face. These weren't your average aircraft. Terauchi described them as square-shaped with some kind of propulsion system that had circular exhausts creating interesting patterns. Besides just being a sight to behold, these things somehow managed to mess with their communications to the ground, which just added to the whole mystery. Now, Terauchi's story did raise some eyebrows, especially since his crew didn't quite see everything he did. They saw the lights, yes, but didn't go as far as to call them spacecraft. And then there were skeptics, like the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, who thought maybe what they saw could be explained by natural causes, like light bending through ice crystals in the clouds. They thought this sounded more reasonable than visitors from outer space, but it still didn't clear up all the questions. 3. U.S. Navy confirmed. 3 UFO sightings. Towards the end of 2019, the U.S. Navy made a surprising move by admitting to the existence of what they call unidentified aerial phenomena. This was all confirmed by a Navy spokesperson, Joe Gradisher. He explained that they decided to come clean about these mysterious sightings to help pilots feel more comfortable reporting them. Before, pilots were worried they'd be judged or not taken seriously because of all the wild theories out there. The focus then shifted to reports from December 2017 to March 2018, which were brought to light by the Stars Academy of Arts and Science. These reports talked about weird oblong objects seen in clear detail, appearing out of nowhere and then disappearing just as quickly. Gradisher didn't stop there. He mentioned a sighting from 2004 and 2 more from 2015, where US fighter pilots encountered these strange objects up close. But here's the really interesting part. These few stories that we hear about are just a small peek into what's really going on. Gradisher said that the Navy deals with these unexplained sightings a lot more often than we realize. And it's not just about the mystery and excitement. These unidentified objects could be a risk to pilots flying around, turning the whole situation into a big, complex puzzle that's yet to be solved. 2. V-shaped UFOs sighted. From 1982 to 1986, something really strange was happening in the sky above Hudson Valley, not far from New York City. This wasn't just a story about seeing something odd once or twice. Over 5,000 people said they saw something unusual, specifically V-shaped objects flying in the sky, covered in bright, colorful lights. It all started on New Year's Eve in 1982. A retired police officer from Kent, New York, was the first to notice it. He thought it was just a regular plane at first, but then he realized it was moving too slowly and quietly to be one. As more people came forward, the story got even more interesting. Most said they saw a V-shaped object flying slowly, unlike any plane they knew. But there were also stories about a round object that could suddenly disappear or move incredibly fast. One of the most talked about moments was when this object flew right above the Indian Point nuclear plant, just 30 feet off the ground. The person in charge of security there thought about trying to get it to leave, but then it just disappeared, leaving no evidence it was ever there. 1. Leroy Chiao reported a UFO. So up there in space, way above us, where the International Space Station zooms around Earth super fast, like over 17,000 miles per hour fast, there were these two space travelers, Leroy Chiao and Salijan Sharipov, back in 2005. They were out on a spacewalk, which means they were outside the station, doing their job to put up navigation stuff, all while floating about 230 miles above Earth. During this, Chiao saw something odd. A bunch of lights lined up in a neat upside-down V shape, just speeding across the dark space. He thought it was super weird. Now, Sharipov didn't see it because he was facing the other way, but they got it on video and pictures. This whole thing got a lot of people excited when it was shown on a TV show about NASA's mysteries, especially in an episode asking if we're alone in the universe. They suggested those lights might have been just from a fishing boat way down on Earth, but not everyone's convinced by that explanation. Even though Chiao saw this strange light show, he's not jumping to say it was aliens or anything, but he's still really interested in all the mysteries out there in space, like if there's anyone else out there looking back at us. So, we've come to the end of our exploration into these UFO sightings. I can't wait to hear what you all think about these incredible stories. Remember to keep looking up, because the universe is vast, and who knows? These sightings might just be the start of all the amazing things out there we've yet to find.